well. If I can get my zoom to work. It's broken now. Old camera, new one is too yellow when it shoots. I guess it's for the best that I'm still playing. It's just very disappointing, not when you think you've won or lost, and that changes necessarily, but when you make such a big error and it just feels like it throws the whole thing off. But the good part about it, and it's like, oh, I was ready for it to end. I wasn't hating the game or anything, but I was really kind of, oh, that was cool, or that was horrible or whatever. But now I feel like my situation is, as the Brits, is more screwed than it should have been, because I went through all that effort and I don't think it got me in a particularly good place. But that's part of the learning process of a game. Hopefully next time I play it in 5-10 years, given the size of the collection now, this will stick somewhat, I guess. But the reason it's good that I'm able to continue playing has to do with, I would have to figure out something else to play. Because I've got something I'm prepping, but it's not anywhere near ready to go. I could find things, there's no question, but there's always the danger that I'll start something even bigger than this, or that has multiple scenarios that I'll just get in my way and cause problems. Okay, so right now we have to deal with the Continental armies falling apart. And if the British have no strategic towns, well, actually, we've managed to fail at that. They have strategic towns in every single area at this point. If they have at least one or all, okay, at least one, looks like it's 50% losses. This is actually, I think, my worst year that I'm going to face. It looks like 78 is the best that I can face. So in each region, I take those losses on the Continental Army, and that's going to be pretty devastating. So here I've got 4 missing. Well, this guy's got a hard trek home, so we're going to take those 2 off. Here I have no Continentals, and I don't have to worry about militia because they come and go, so they don't get decreased by this. Over here I have 3, 6, 7, 8, and that's it. So I gotta lose 4 of these. Let's see if I can find a 4. And I mean, if you really know the game well, you can probably pre-plan for stuff like this, just like you can pre-plan for the 1777 event, and actually probably tinker with what you're going to do and how you're going to cope with it. Okay, over here is my biggest. I've got 3, 13, 17, 21, and I don't remember which way it's rounded. Since the Brits took a big hit there, I'm going to say I'm going to have to kill 11 of these. And we'll let Arnold lose his 4. This is not an easy place for the Brits to hold. And that means I have 7 more I got to lose. I don't really want to lose Wayne. It's not like the Americans aren't kind of exposed here anyway. 7 more for the Americans, and that's going to be these 10 dropping down to a 3. So that's going to be a kind of painful situation. And I'm wearing my gloves for the Valley Forge type experience that's going on. It has nothing to do with, being in towns or encampments or anything like that. I don't need anything. I'm just going to suffer for it. The game handles everything, in this sort of way where it's all kind of simple. Now, I get an Indian back because of the leader roles. and then these things. But other than this, I've got to worry about the normal positioning of what's going on. And what's going on is a little different from what we've been seeing, because everywhere now the British are present. And that may not be the best thing for them, because that may create some factors. So I've got to worry about basically status C or E, depending on whether there's any continentals left. And there are continentals, I believe, in every area. So everything is going to be average across the board. Which is not really what I want when I'm talking about from the British point of view. I kind of like the idea of, and this is why I wouldn't have spread out now, of the Brits relying on the Tory militia to try to hunt down any Continental Army troops that are trying to work their way north or whatever. And that's not going to be the case now. So we've gotten ourselves into kind of a bind, and I've got to worry about my 10 cities, and that's going to be tough. The coastal cities in the south are cheaper to hold, but they kind of don't like the idea of creating the heavy Continental Army forces. If I can try to, I mean, it was great to prevent them for a turn. I've lost one big army of British units, though, already. The force coming down from Canada that got wiped out. So we're already kind of hurting in terms of forces. All right, well, I'll allocate these, get those things on the map, and then we'll be ready to start a new turn. It's going to be winter, which means winter restrictions up here, so we're not going to see the broad moves that we saw in the fall there. Well, in addition to generating Continental Army and various militia coming back, I don't think any ASM Tory militia disappeared, because I now have presence, and I got to get out of there. We also got the British replacement points. Now the British get 2 replacement points a turn, an interphase, each in one port. And then in addition, as long as I have New York, I get 2 in each interface. So I kind of don't want to leave New York. In the winter, I would get 1 in Charleston or Philadelphia if I had either of them. I do not have either of them. That might have been reasons to goal for those, but it's not. I don't think that was really available as a choice for me, even if I hadn't gone for what I did. Now, I'll start getting supplies as well, 2 in, as long as I have Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Charleston, or Quebec. And that's all I get, is just 2 each quarter for that. So that's not, where I have supply problems, they're going to continue. And unfortunately, New York City is one of the places where I do not have any supplies. I might want to be building a magazine there. Unfortunately, Newport here is outside of my Boston range. That's one of my patrol forces. I've got a patrol coming out here, for what it's worth, out of Ticonderoga. It's not going to get me as far as I need to get to Norwich. But yeah, I've sort of succeeded in that, cut the colonies in half with the Hudson, but it's not really that potent. I can see Washington can creep his way across. The only thing that kind of helps is these mountains make it so slow to cross that I can probably try to interdict him on the way, but it's Washington. He's going to get away, right? If it wasn't for the leadership counters, the Continental Army would be in a lot of trouble here. But with sneaky Washington there, it's not going to be easy to catch him as he slides back and forth across. And that actually may be a reason to think about not ever playing with the leaders, is that you take out one of the kind of valid choices, I think, which is interdicting the Hudson River and then trying to catch the Continentals in there and destroy them. That is actually my goal, though, is to try to demolish the Continental Army over in New England if I can. The reason is that's where the majority of their forces are, and if I can put them really deeply on the defensive, I should be able to do pretty well even after my screw up. But I've lost a whole army, and that's going to hurt. All right. I guess we move on, and yeah, that'll happen during the American turn. Okay, so here in January, well, first of all, there can't be a lot of movement, but we see how he's heading down this way now. He could actually, I think he's got a minus to his, well, he can't be affected, but this Leslie actually has a -1 to his tactical abilities right now because he's sitting on the bigger stack. I made that big stab to stay in the game. Well, I ended up with an unbalance there. We'll see if I remember that. Probably not. I pulled out of Charleston. Probably want this here just so rebel forces can't grab it easily. And sailed up here. That way I'm not going to have the same depressing influence on my Tories in the deep south. What about in here? Well, we're not sure yet. We're actually looking to the possibility of gathering these forces and making a march towards Philadelphia, but we don't have a lot here. We have a fair-sized force in New York, but we want to see how things play out. And things are playing out in kind of a scary fashion because Washington's marching on Boston. February, the Brits start moving to try to enclose and capture and restrict Washington's movement. He's not really in a position to probably take Boston because he only has one supply unit with him, and that's going to be somewhat problematic. I'm not quite sure what he's up to, and I don't think it's good for him, actually. Meanwhile, in the south, not much I can do with anything. Whereas I'm trying to move some artillery down to New York, which I consider more important. I may actually make New York a fortification, expending an artillery on that. The problem with that, of course, is the fortifications may be more important. The artillery may be more important, even on defense, than making a fortification. It's a weird system the way it works. The pluses on the combat table may be more important than doubling the size of a unit. That's, again, it depends on how big a force you're going to put in the fort. But if you're going to have a small force there, you may be looking at the 5-to-1 table no matter what, and the artillery's better on its own. I don't know. Boston may be such an example. So I've got like 5 units in Boston, which is a fairly big force, but it's going to be a 5-to-1 attack. But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 artillery there. Okay. And a decent leader. So I've got a total of -7 to the die roll that Washington's going to be facing. I don't believe he has any artillery. He's only going to be able to fight 1 round. And at -7, that means the highest he can get is a -1, which is each lose 1. And he's as likely to lose his own forces alone, and most likely for nothing to happen at all. It doesn't look like a pleasant attack. Now, if this was a fortification, instead of 5 strength points, it would be 10. And getting 5-to-1 against 10 strength points is pretty tough. So there's a significant enough force there that a fortress might make sense. but no matter how you crack it, it doesn't look easy to take. As we finish up, Washington is slipping this way because this just looks like a trap and not a very, very pleasant one. Now this shows up at another point that I think is somewhat hard to believe. Yes, there were winter campaigns, but they were generally pretty minor in scope. And sure, you can't move very much here, but I'm still wandering, in this big crescent and being kind of chased through the mountains. This is obscene. The British Army marching over the mountains in the winter just does not sound at all believable to me. Obviously, with some of the actions that some of the rebels took, you can't just make that impenetrable in the winter. But I don't see the British regulars marching up there. I think they'd be comfy in their warm, cozy beds right about now. However, as Washington consolidates his forces, Howe can't face him. He was too split up, so he had to pull back towards the Hudson. Actually, I found out he wasn't in the biggest stack anyway. That's over in New York. And we're in this kind of weird stalemate where New England isn't under control, and I can't quite get my grip on Washington. The central states are not under control, because there's too big a force in Philadelphia. I've got like threats on both sides that I can't really cope with. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I need to get a strike force and send it somewhere. This was going to be my strike force, but if this moves off this way or this way, either way, I'm opening up a threat that, there's the danger of if I pursue Washington that he'll pop out. And there's the threat that if I run this way, Washington will pop out. I'm not really afraid of what's in Philadelphia taking New York quite yet, because I have a big force in New York. Now, if I strip some of that off, I don't have a big force in New York, and that's kind of the scary thing. And the big force in New York, I don't think is big enough to easily cope with Greene down in Philadelphia. Greene's very competent. It's a tough situation right now. But it's winter. We can't expect a good campaign to happen during the winter, I think. Now it's on to the Continentals. And the Colonials march back to Hartford. And it feels like we're back where we started. We should have just sat there. The main reason being that Boston just looks impenetrable, whereas New York does not. New York's got a big force, but they don't have the artillery. And if I can consolidate my two Continental forces, I think I can take New York, which is a potentially large source of reserves. On the other hand, as soon as this swings down, it's we're in this weird sort of balance right now. The possibility of the British taking 20 cities, man, you got to wreck the army to do that. I know there's some complaints about, oh, hey, it shouldn't be a war about controlling territory. You can't win this game with, if the Americans have a reasonable army on the field. So that army has to be destroyed. I can't just try to go for the cities. Now, I obviously have to worry about that minimum, but I also have to worry about, to get to that 20, I have to do something pretty extreme to the Continental Army. So, the Brits managed what almost turned out to be a three-pronged attack, but ends up two, leaving their chief generals behind because I don't have to worry for a few months. I also stripped some troops out of Boston, so it actually is a three-pronged attack. The one thing that didn't make it is Leslie down here. He had to force march and succeeded on 1 through 4, didn't quite make it. I'm bringing everything to bear against Washington. I'm hoping to destroy him, but Washington's a tricky guy, so unless I've got better odds than I don't think I'm going to succeed. But I may wear him down a little bit. I've got supplies, I think, to a greater extent than he does. Then over here, Cornwallis, with what looks like a huge stack, but it's really, I think, a 3-2 attack, over here. I could have gone against this, but they've got the entrenchment and they've got supplies, and I don't want to deal with that. I don't have supplies. Continental force was destroyed up here, but Washington managed to slip away without any combat at all. And that's kind of dangerous because New York's threatened now. Boston weakened, Washington was able to overrun it. Remember, it wasn't fortified, it was just entrenched. And grab all that artillery. I don't know if this is a good move or not. New York is just a death trap. As long as there's big British armies moving around in that area, you don't want to be in New York, I don't think. Unless you have tremendous force, which is actually why Greene isn't doing anything, basically. He sent Morgan over to help shepherd some more troops over. And Schuyler came running down, tried to force march into Portsmouth because I moved some troops out of Portsmouth to join the Boston gang, and he didn't make his force march roll. I think that's fine. I don't think anybody's going to go capture Portsmouth, but it is a fort, and I kind of don't want to destroy that fort. It serves me some purpose, but I also don't want to leave it open, particularly for the British to grab, because it might be of value to them. I'm not quite sure why. I'm not quite sure if it's of value to anyone, to tell you the truth, but there's kind of the how to defend it. But yeah, we've the problem for Washington is, sure, I knocked out some British troops, not too many. I grabbed a bunch of cannon, which I could spike. They're not going to serve me much purpose if the British attack, because I'm not entrenched. So, but if I park them in Portsmouth with a little force, they become one hell of a threat up there. So, you know, that could become a center of resistance even if Washington leaves the area. On the other hand, I probably have to face another combined attack by those British stacks, and that could be pretty deadly. Of course, I have to face the same if I went to New York. Could I have gotten out of here another way? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know. You know, I mean, I could force march and run around up to the Hudson, and there would have been an advantage to that, because then I've kind of slipped away from where the Brits can reasonably reach me. Things going on. Cornwallis is right on Morgan's heels here. He did a force march, didn't quite reach him. He tried. Leslie has gathered up all the troops. Yeah, what the hell? Let's bring Hall in too. Just make sure he doesn't get caught. Yeah, these huge stacks are a problem. And bring him in as well. I can always split up and take my locations as needed. I've got, you know, a couple turns before I hit the interface. You don't have to constantly occupy things, and since I'm not entrenched there for some unknown reason. Okay, now what's really interesting about Leslie is he's in command of New England and the entire British Army, whereas Howe is back here in New York, and it's perfectly fine. Even if I hit the interface, I'm okay, as long as I don't have that big stack in the central states. Howe is like, yeah, man, that's your job. you wipe Washington out. I'll sit here and attend some nice parties. The artillery is making its way down to West Point. We'll try to slip them across the river. We've got some natives guarding the artillery, which seems a little weird, but, you know, I don't want it to fall to, like, a single strength point or something. If the artillery, if the Continentals want to send a fair-sized little force, 2 or 3 strength points to attack that, that's fine, because then I can try to react to that and take it out, although it may not be as easy as it sounds. Not much going on anywhere else. I haven't moved these guys. I probably should. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just to apply some pressure to keep moving north, I guess. I don't know. It's really tough to keep the troops from the south from kind of slithering through at some point or another. You know, that's the big game of whack-a-mole going on down there, but the big mole is here. And once I take care of that battle, we'll see what happens. What I did with the Continentals would have been absolutely insane without Washington there, and it was pretty close even with. He lost half his army before he got his special I can get out of here role. I've grabbed a bunch of artillery though. I could limp my way back up to Portsmouth, but that's a siege I don't really want to be caught in, and so it feels to me like I'll probably dispatch something with the artillery that way. I'm going to destroy the magazine, and I'm just going to clear out of there. It causes the Brits some problems, but nothing too significant. And the big thing is I have really trimmed down his army at almost no losses to myself. I think I took 1 unit loss. The first round of combat was kind of a tied round. The second round was bloody as hell. And now it's to the Americans, and Washington's got to try to scamper away. So now as we move to June, what do we got? Washington forced marched away. Now this is an interesting thing. That whole 8 hex thing, that's if you're playing without the optional forced march rules. The forced march rules make it harder for the Americans to get away from the British. So, you know, I can't just position myself 8 away because a 1-point forced march is pretty likely to catch me. I like that aspect of it. So Washington went and ran as far as he could. He also has Greene coming towards him. Greene came out of Philadelphia as Morgan moved in there. Now what Greene did is he was trying to reach these Indians and take these additional guns and, you know, maybe launch an attack down on New York or pull the guns back to Philadelphia, whichever way. But the problem with that is he needed 3 points to force march. Now Greene has, a lot of the Brits have this too, hey, if you really want to get there, you can subtract 1 from your forced march die roll before you roll the die, but you automatically lose a unit. You push your men extremely. I didn't want to do that. I didn't view that as that important. Anyway, I ended up getting 2 extra movement points. Only 1 could be used in the direction I wanted to, and I have to use the other one. The only way I can, because otherwise the entire force is destroyed, the only way I can justify that is he gets lost or something and starts wandering up into the Catskills. Don't know how you get lost along the Hudson, but Greene managed it. We also have stuff moving down here. And now we have to consider command aspects. One of the problems we have is I think Greene actually has, no, it's a larger force I think than Washington has. So if Washington moves into the central, we got to do a leadership swap or combine or something like that, which is what we intend on doing. But you can see where the problem is. And the Brits are in a position to quite possibly, but not guaranteed, grab all of New England again. Everything's open. The only question is they have to move first, and then do they expose, you know, something like Springfield or Hartford? And does Washington take the bait, you know? Does he want to? Another consideration in place. Sullivan here has not a lot of units, but a lot of guns in Newport. And he can reach, Portsmouth. He can reach, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4. See, yeah, Cambridge and Boston, it looks like they're next to each other, even though it's hard to tell if that the crease is right, you know, the division between maps is right where you would be able to tell. Anyway, if he couldn't get there, he shouldn't have been there already. I counted the movement through Cambridge. I don't know if he'll be able to make it back. We'll make a decision whether he has to force march or not. But he's got a big threat with all those cannons if there's any kind of entrenchment in Boston, which kind of makes you don't want to entrench in Boston because, or you don't want to fight in the entrenchments even if you do entrench. So that's another force I have to worry about. Now I have to leave a certain size force behind in Boston. It's like 4 strength points, but I may have to actually leave more than that. Now I have a lot of British troops. I have over 40 British regulars in that stack. So I might be able to afford even putting a good-sized force in both Hartford and Springfield and covering Newport and Boston, with Boston adequate to cover against that, and still be an... Oh, no. I'm not going to get control anyway. Benedict Arnold. And the Brits did a couple of things. I hope I did the right things, because I just moved Cornwallis up into the area. And I think I may have a problem because of that. He marched over into Philadelphia and took it. He does not have a big force, though. I think he has a larger force than Howe, though. That's the problem. I don't know if we can get our reinforcements. I think we can get our reinforcements in New York and balance that out beforehand, because it's within one. Leslie failed to catch Washington. Cornwallis marched in and took out Morgan. He's run away to join Greene. And we also shipped out of Portsmouth and Norfolk. And that gets us in a position where we have no presence of British regulars south of the central states. We're within one city of having controlled the middle states. They're not as big a deal as New England, but they are of some value. The problem is, this is a hard border to defend, having to keep forces in Albany, New York, and then up here in the north at Ticonderoga, as well as, oh, no, we don't have Wyoming either. Okay, so we're not that close. But it's a possible thing to look at. I'm just not seeing, it as being holdable in the same way as maybe being in a position where I have 10 cities is something that I can more easily control. And that's kind of the problem. I feel like down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 cities running down here is probably easier to control than to try to get 10 cities 10 or 11 cities under solid control up in the Northeast. And that's why the Southern strategy works better. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but it's essentially the driving factor to that idea. And then, I don't know what the minimal victory condition is in 79. Is it the same? 10 strategic towns, including an entire area in 79, or you lose. And I don't see how that's possible, to tell you the truth. Just because, well, maybe if I end up with the Southern strategy. But at this point, I'm having a really tough time foreseeing that I'm going to have the 10 cities easily. But I really do want to try to destroy Washington. And I feel like I'm right at the edge of it, But there's going to be a horde of new troops coming in New England. And in the middle states, a decent amount as well. And it's getting to the point. And then the South is going to actually be richer for continental forces. But they're hard to get up to where the central command sort of is. Basically, Washington's pushed his way up towards Albany. He failed to get his force march there. Greene made it there. He was a little closer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's not an easy way across here, is there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's still a force march range there, so we could end up seeing Washington getting hammered again. And he doesn't have a lot of troops. I thought about trying to consolidate and take New York, take away a couple of British troops that way, but New York just looked like too much of a disaster. No forced march. The Brits can just march right in there. But right now, we're going into our interface here. It's a turn for the Brits. Leslie managed to overrun Washington, destroying... He only had 7 strength points. He's moved on. He's got his bigger force here back in Albany. But, That's a big hunk of his troops that got wiped out there. No leader losses, though. Over here, the Tory militia failed completely and got drained down. But actually, the Americans used their supply throughout the entire battle, so that's gone. I guess the biggest thing is the Brits are eating up the Continental supply, not just here, but over here they grabbed a stack, 2 or 3 of them. So the Continental Army's having a harder and harder time being able to actually operate. I may have to flee to the backwoods and such not, and you know, if I can station a fair-sized unit at like Stanwix or something with the Brits to bottle Washington up, say in western New York or something, I might be able to dispatch half my army to go clear out the New England area, and we may actually be in a position where we're in pretty good shape going into the end of 77. Let's see what the Continentals can do. Continentals made a probably very questionable choice. Washington went for Ticonderoga instead of maybe trying to slide up over into the mountains. The nice thing about Ticonderoga is I have kind of this potential of support through all my remaining forces that are over here. The bad thing about it is it's kind of a trap. That potential of support requires that I control the bateau, that I don't get besieged, all kind of other things. I had a fair amount of force to begin with, some, I don't know what, 18 strength points or something. Now I'm down to 12. The battle didn't go terribly well. Maybe worst of all, Washington got wounded, so I can't even deploy outside the fort and hope to run away. I've got the inestimable Charlie Lee in charge of the army now. Leslie can dispatch forces to cross into Massachusetts or whatever. I've got Howe there now. Well, you know, that's kind of a problem. But it looks like the Brits actually have the Continentals on the run now. And it's funny because, you know, last year, the Brits were near what I thought was an auto loss. Well, they actually, had I been right about the rule, the timing of the minimal victory conditions, they would have lost. And now it looks like they're doing quite well. I don't suggest any of this has anything to do with my brilliance as a Brit, but more my incompetence in general with the game. It's a tough system, you know, really open to mistakes, and a lot of the old Avalon Hill games are very unforgiving. This isn't one that you can kind of play the way I like to with any success in terms of just, yeah, let's just throw some troops. You really kind of need to study the board and think about things a little more than I like to. But I am having a good time just throwing things at each other and seeing what happens anyway. More than I can remember before. Brits juggle their troops with Burgoyne marching back to New York, Howe running up to Albany. So he's in command of something. He's going to have to move next turn to be in charge of the biggest stack in the central area. But neither Leslie nor this poor fellow, who could have been in a world of hurt, made it to Ticonderoga. And Lee decided to abandon it. He left it there. He doesn't want to destroy Ticonderoga. You might ask, well, why? Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's Charlie Lee, I guess. I'm not sure. He did destroy the magazine and took some of the supplies with him. And the problem is he's in potential range still of Leslie. And if Leslie hits him here, it's over for his stat, for the 12 strength points or whatever. But good old Arnold marched back down here to Portsmouth. And right now New England is, you know, completely untouched by the Brits. Now, obviously they're going to be making a march on there, I think. But yeah, it's kind of rough going. And I forgot to move some of the U.S. troops. Probably want to consolidate these guys here for now. So they really don't have anything, they don't have a chance of really affecting the main battle up in the New England area. So I want to keep them kind of happy down there as much as I can. I'm too far away to chase down and get to Wyoming in time if, as it looks as likely, the middle states end up completely controlled by the Brits. But I might be able to make it there before the winter phase. So, there's this, geez, that may not be enough territory to hold. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 still means 4 more cities. Now those are sitting right here, but I also have my fleet capable of, undertaking one of those little adventures like I did last time to grab, Norfolk is pretty easy. Down here, Savannah's pretty easy as well. So those are options that are open if need be. The argument that I've seen that the Southern strategy is a necessity, I disagree with. It may be eventually, but here's the thing. If you can succeed in getting a pretty good control on either the Central or the New England states, you take away, especially the New England states, you take away the big production of Continental Army units. And if you can get both, I think it's over. But by doing that, and taking away that production, you're making it easier so that you can get to the 20 when it comes time. Now that may involve making the Southern strategy eventually, but I think actually, the historical goals make sense here. Grab one of these areas, secure it, try to secure it. The Brits weren't successful at that. The hard part is that 10 cities. That's been the hard thing for me, to keep a concentration of force sufficient to do the damage that I want and still take 10 opposing, 10 of the strategic towns securely, and that's the tough part of it. But there just aren't quite enough up here. It's not like there are that many down there either. It's easier to control down there. But by limiting the Continental Army's growth, you can put yourself in a better position to win the game, not real early, but in the long run. Okay, so Leslie fails to make his forced march, but Ticonderoga's fallen. We've taken all of the Central Territory. It's going to be tough for the Americans to dislodge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 would be like a 5-point forced march. We're probably not going to make that. Other options might be a march 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Not much better. So it looks like the Brits are going to hold, no force march available there. They're going to hold the central region completely for a turn. Now they've held, for an interface, they held New England for one at one point. But yeah. And the hard job now is to make sure we make our minimal victory conditions while we're trying to pursue this wipeout the Continental Army, which doesn't seem to be quite working. It's close, but it's not quite there. And General Lee flees from Norwich and Leslie. Doesn't really work to have one big force chasing the Americans. You kind of need two big forces coming from two sides, like the Saratoga plan, but, the Burgoyne plan, but you can get yourself in a lot of trouble that way, and I kind of don't want to get myself in a lot of trouble. I lost my army for the game already for the Brits. Here in October, Leslie splits Grey off, basically force split in half, leaving some up here in the city. Cities are going to be the important thing, right? Because I can't count on the Continentals not being able to make a stab and take something and knock me out of the game if I don't have the backup of the 10 points. And so essentially, I'm just imagining what the 79 turn is going to be like, where I have to control an area and have 10 cities. But Gray was unable to even really try a forced march. But Leslie coming over here is covering the Hudson River basin. And then over here we set sail with Howe to try to grab 3 more cities here. So what am I at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the middle, in the central states. Maybe 3 more here is 9, 10. And there right now, it looks to me like it's going to be tough for Lee to hold the center of New England. But who knows, what opportunities will kind of devolve. So now back over to the American side. And by the way, I can send a fleet down to go take Savannah as well, sending a strength point down there. It's going to screw with, and this is totally ahistorical, sending ships off with 1 unit to go sit there for a month and then leave. But, and pretty goofy, but it's the only way that I can see to make this strategy work when, and still have the points that I need to handle, passing through in case the Continentals are able to take a city from me in the area that I had control. There's Greene falling into the trap of New York. He went in and took it. No supplies left, though. The Brits were able to fight enough rounds that they ate all their supplies once, which is enough to destroy them. I also have the option of whether or not I don't have any cannons left in my force pool, and I captured a cannon. So I've got to decide if I want that cannon and maybe destroy one up here at Providence, or am I going to have to move anyway? And I think the answer is I'm going to have to move anyway. So I just spiked that gun, thereby reducing the amount of cannons available. But the danger here is that the Brits can come down from 2 directions. It doesn't really matter. New York is kind of a hole to be in. And the only way I can kind of get away from there easily if I get bottled in is to build bateaux. And I don't have any supply units, so I can't do that, actually. So the other option, of course, though, is, if they just sit here, might be able to, I don't know what, but if they actually siege me, it's more of an issue, but I've got a lot of strength there. Of course, I don't have the supplies, so that strength is not as great as it should be, and, well, without supplies, the cannon aren't going to help me either, so it's good that I destroyed those. No movement over here. Thought about trying to move up there, but I don't have a leader for it. Cornwallis escaped over to Philadelphia. My eventual goal was kind of to try to head south and hit Philly, but I am very worried. It's not easy to get down the Hudson. It gets kind of rough around West Point. And if you've ever seen the terrain there, I think you'll understand why. There's some really interesting roads along those mountains, right down into the valley, right into the river, basically. And that's the best way across, basically. Over here, Gray has kind of a rough walk too. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's a 3-point forced march if he wants to make it. For Leslie, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So he's not going to make it either, but they can kind of cluster in there and make things difficult. Problem is we have a time limit. And there's these forces. So it's not like, you know, I don't think I can hold Boston and Newport. If those forces come out to Springfield or Hartford, I can probably engage them. But I'm getting far away from this, and I've got this number of cities I have to hold, and it just really doesn't look like it's going to be at all easy. Now, if I let green slip away, I probably don't have enough power under gray to take this out, but I might have enough. It's hard to tell. There's enough, you know, I'd have to spread out my units, and it's just such a painful situation that I'm looking at here. That would be the great option, though, if I could, like, you know, chase green out of New York and shut down the entire North. I don't think that kind of fantasy is going to happen, though. Philly's probably going to fall, and then I've got, you know, the Continentals kind of kicking around right there. So what about a count? If Philly falls, I can probably take New York then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That doesn't look too bad, so I can probably survive the turn and might be able to get some kind of advantage if the Continentals try to make a stab to end things early. Plus I've got this one. So yeah, it looks like I can probably survive, I hope. The Brits begin the what I consider ludicrous dance to the south. It just doesn't make sense to me, but it's too hard to hold all of this. So the points that I have, I need a few more to kind of guarantee that I can keep through the game, and those few more mean a quick occupation in Virginia, which of course is going to collapse. And then down in South Carolina, I actually sent Rawdon down here to go take Augusta. I kind of was considering, I mean, Rawdon was being sent, and he's probably the worst choice. Let's send Burgoyne down there, because we'd like to keep Rawdon. Actually, let's send Howe down there, because there's no one I more want out of play than him. I kind of want Rawdon available in case I need to make an attack. I can take some penalties on him. Burgoyne can't go below a 0 anyway. I haven't been paying attention. You know, I think I've taken some cities where I should have a bonus. Like green should maybe be a +3, but that's just too much fiddliness. I'd have to add more counters to the stacks, or else have some way of rotating them, or something, or maybe mark them. If there was a sheet for everyone, that would be a potential way to keep track of it. But honestly, I just don't think that facet adds much to the game. It is something that I believe in, but this game doesn't have the system for it, which is the idea that if a leader's been successful, they're seen to be more likely to be successful. Whether or not they'll actually succeed again is kind of besides the point. So this was something I considered with the old Victory Games Civil War game, which was there'd be a couple of things you'd keep track of when a leader was successful. First of all, there is the possibility that success breeds success, that this is actually a better leader than you thought he was initially. That was always one idea in the back of my mind. Another was to keep score of successes to determine who gets promoted and who doesn't, to form a better system for advancement in that game. The latter, that game is probably the wrong scale for it, and the former, I feel like that's something for another game as well. So, but these are ideas about leadership that game triggered with its much richer leadership rules than, say, Freddy the Great has. And in a sense, this game is showing hints of, yeah, you know, we not only have the rank, but you have to be on top of the most important stack. You start seeing that come out in Europa Universalis, which indicates basically where every leader must be based on rank. how strictly you want to interpret that rule is up to you, but I tend to be a little looser about it than the rule seems to indicate. And something along that line would maybe suit this as well. But the point is, the game wasn't designed and the components weren't designed with that in mind. In fact, you have to add your own little leader counters. But the thing is, a leader being able to show 3 values on a 2-sided counter is impossible, and that's kind of the issue that I run into there. All right, let's see how the Continentals, Americans, whatever you want to call them, can respond, because we've got Gray in a position where he can actually hit Boston, Springfield. I don't think he can get to Newport. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I want to move. Maybe I want to send a counter down there, because honestly, I'm pretty close to absolute control of New England. And if I can get that with any safety, but that's going to be tough to do because of this New York force. So I may split something off of him. Problem is, anything I split off, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, anything I split off is just going to get squished. So I don't think I can chance it. And I try to force march, so I can't not move that far. And we see the Continentals trying to challenge the British strategy with little units flying off to try to attack these kind of weak British units that might be able to grab a city. This makes things difficult. So for example, Augusta, 1, 2, and I'm not going to be able to reach Augusta. So the Brits get away there for free. Over here, I don't have a leader, so I'm not able to just rush in and attack these militia. You know, so Burgoyne's going to get his 3 here, so we're looking at half the cities I need there, which means it's going to be pretty easy for the Brits to meet the 10-point requirement. We have Arnold charging up here, which probably prevents control of New England. And the dangerous part, though, is Greene came out of New York, no boats or anything, so he had to walk around, and he left some dragoons back in New York to wreck the fortifications, because I don't think, basically I think that the Brits are more likely to want that fortification than the Americans are. But Greene is in an exposed position. First of all, Leslie can obviously get to him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's even possible Gray could. But Leslie's got a big enough force that I think he's going to make the strike for Greene, and Gray is going to try to see what he can do in terms of, you know, maybe Portsmouth, which has been reduced, for Arnold to march up, and taking that would be of some definite value. Probably want that fort destroyed. It does me no good whatsoever. And the Brits have spread out, getting as far as Augusta here, all the way up to Charlottesville. There's some risk I'll lose one of these stacks. Okay, you know, there's just an attrition cost to trying to hold cities, which becomes, you know, then I can ignore the South for a while until I have to meet the 10 cities and an area under control, which may be a big deal. Maybe too late by then. I'm hoping, you know, the French start maybe coming in here. They probably should have started coming in earlier, given the first major battle. But then, you know, if the game took that into account. But then the game starts taking a different flavor, and I don't think the Brits have much of a chance once the French are in. So it has to be this next year, you know, that I can go to 20 cities. So maybe we have to continue with the Southern strategy. We have to start shipping more troops down there. Grey came in, stormed New York, took it. We can see up here leaving Norwich to Arnold. I couldn't reach him to kill him, so it seemed best to move everything over into the central area. And Leslie is right here fighting Greene. And he's actually outnumbered, I think. 18, 22, 24. Yeah, he's got like 23 to 24. But Leslie has supply and Greene does not. So it works out to be a 3 to 2. And the question is, what Greene wants to do. He's got a lot of options here. He can fight this out. He's a better leader, and it's just not that terrible. But there is a chance he could be wiped out. There's a chance Leslie could be wiped out, actually, because of the vagaries of the card play and everything. Without Washington around, it's just too tough to get away. And Greene got himself caught, and that would be the conventional game without the leaders. Greene got himself caught here. That's the kind of risk you might take with Washington. It's just not worth it with any other leader. And totally slaughtered. You know, there's some chance you might outguess your opponent. The Brits can frontal assault every time. When it was close, that wasn't a safe choice. But once the battle started turning against the Americans, the Brits just said, well, we don't want them to get away. And so then for the Americans, it's like, well, do I give you a -2 with an enfilade, or do I take a risk at a withdrawal? And actually the Brits did not frontal assault one time, which I think is kind of silly, but it was actually not at tremendous odds. It was at like 3 to 1, I think. So Greene and command staff are over here. Leslie got wounded, which could throw the Allied command into some problems, because if Grey, I don't know where I was. I don't know who has the bigger stack of regulars. Grey is the higher ranked leader. I think he has less troops actually, but again, he can take the New York reinforcements and he'll have more. So I don't think we're going to have a reduction of leadership value. But it looks really bad for the Continentals. Now, they have one turn. Arnold doesn't really have enough force, I don't think, to take anything, nor the movement, really. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, he's not going to be able to take Albany or Ticonderoga with what's in the way. So we're pretty much stuck. We have, you know, all of New England's been cleared of the Brits. That's not necessarily a good thing. It means less rebel militia, which means New England will be easier to conquer on the next turn. The area we have, so we're not going to have the loss of victory points. So now, at this point, it becomes the Continentals' attempt to try to save their position. And now the French will come in, yeah? The rebels attempt a couple of revenge attacks, and we end up taking Charlottesville. Arnold fails to get up here. Washington's back. I don't know what he can do, though. I put him over here. And this is the thing. It's really tough to get leaders down into the South if you're the Americans. And, you know, Washington was a choice to do so. I noticed that I'm cheating, though. When forces were wiped out and they're not in a fortress, I've been rolling normal casualties for them instead of the capture roll, instead of the higher chance capture roll. I'm just going to keep doing that because I don't want to re-roll the dice for the big stack that was here, and then Rawdon got caught in this battle up here, and I've once you start making a mistake like that, it's hard to go back. Maybe I'll choose to start to go back, go to the actual rules coming in the new year. So I guess the first thing that happens here is we check to see if the British made their minimum victory points, and they did. They have the central area, and then we're going to have to reduce the Continental Army. This is the winter of '77, which can't be good. About the low point, right? And it feels like the low point now. So over here, the Brits control a strategic town, so we're going to lose half our strength. That's going to be 3. Our little patrol out there wasn't doing us any good. Over here, they control at least one strategic town that halves our strength. We've got 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to lose 4. We'll take them all over here. Managed to keep the supply wagon, actually. Only attacked once with it. Over here, we don't have any troops, so I'm not going to worry. And then in New England, the British control nothing. So we only lose a quarter, and I don't know what we have as a quarter. That's 3. There's not much. Yeah. Looks like we have 6, so I think we're losing 2. I just don't see, how we can continue terribly well with what we have. You know what? Given the size of this force, I'm going to take Washington down here instead, because he has some chance of improving the situation in the Deep South. And we'll leave Charlie Lee in charge over here. And now we move to the next year, and we'll be doing the standard troop deployments for the new year.